Welcome and greetings, everybody. Dr. Espen here from Dr. ETV. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing someone that has interviewed me several times, a man that has an incredible energy, a beautiful smile, a really quirky nature about him, but moreover, an energy and a message that I think is really, really, really important for us in today's society, considering what's happening in our lives, with our purpose, with our fulfillment, with our mental and emotional state, and many other things. I want to say a special welcome to my brother Amrit. How are you, my friend?
It is such a pleasure to be here, bro. Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm so excited to be here.
Mate, it's an honor. And for those of you who haven't heard Amrit speak before, that's his thing. You know, that's the sound that he makes every podcast. I remember you interviewed me the first time. He goes off on a woof, and I'm like, shit, this is great. This is great. Had a pretty good chat. What do you reckon?
Oh, man. The conversations we had have been so well received. Not just, obviously, I'm biased because I'm in the conversation, so I love it. And I have so much love for what you do in the world, obviously, which is why I got you onto the show multiple times. But then I love when, that translates also to other people tuning into the YouTube videos and the podcast. And then you just see, like, even over time, like, some episodes do really well when they get launched and they sort of then flatline, or some episodes take a while to get going, but the conversations we've had just continue to grow stronger and stronger and stronger. The message is super potent. And yeah, I think people love the conversations as well, Touchwood, and I think they're really important. I'm a big fan of your work, as you know, Espen, as well. So it's a real privilege and an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, we're going to go deep today, guys. So for those of you watching and listening today, we're going to have a chat about how to transition from whatever mental struggles that you're going through when it comes to a lack of fulfillment and purpose, and how to transition into a life, as I call it, pioneered by purpose. So a quick background on Amrit's story. Back in the day, he struggled with 6 years of depression. I know from me as a primary healthcare physician, if I have a patient in depression for 6 months, which is what defines it as chronic, they are going through a really, really, really tough time, let alone 6 years. So that's going to be really powerful to have the conversation about how Amrit went from 6 years of depression into living a life pioneered with passion and purpose. So stay tuned for that. And this is, of course, not medical or any kind of advice, but again, a really inspiring story. And I truly do believe you're going to pick up some things here that might really serve you in that regard. So we're going to talk about that transition and how he healed himself from from depression using meditation, and how this may be relevant for us in our career, vocation, and mission with potential career misalignment. Now, fast forward to today, he runs a successful podcast, bro. You're doing amazing things. You're inspiring people around the world. And he's now literally operating as a full-time, booked out purpose and leadership coach. So I want to ask you, buddy, before we get into, the takeaways and the real nuggets here, how did that take place? How did you go from being stuck and depressed for so long to be able to make the transition back to presence and purpose where you are today?
Wow, it's such a big question, and thank you so much for the glowing introduction. It's really humbling to receive. Oftentimes we run the risk of saying it was a moment, or it was a moment in time, or there was something special that happened, or a significant trauma that led people to a certain way. But for me, one of the things I consistently remind people is it's a sequence of moments. It's a series of events. Oftentimes, especially in the personal development space, we're waiting for, like, I'm going to go along to that one seminar and I'm going to quit my job. It's rarely like that. The realization of the pain and the friction builds in you. So one of the challenges that I had, the root cause of my depression, was actually, if we dial all the way in, was I grew up in an Eastern family in a Western environment. Yeah. And those are very different culture scapes. Yeah. Like, literally, you've got the landscape that you can see in the world. Culture is a thing. Yeah. And it's two very different culture scapes, to grow up with Eastern values, but growing up in a world that respects Western values. And as I started to become an adolescent, some of the most formative years, other than, when you're 0 to 7, is when you literally spike in testosterone and puberty, especially for a male. So between 15 and 21, that space of time, as I was formulating my identity, I was going through this existential crisis where an identity really couldn't be formed in a healthy way, because I guess I'm I should probably go straight into the proper example of what was wrong was, in the East, as my heritage is Indian, and not to say that, there's anything wrong with a particular culture set and there's anything better about another culture set. But the values that I grew up with due to being Indian, in India, you've got a significant amount of population. You've got a significant amount of pollution. It's a really tough place to get by. It's a really tough place. 1/5 or 1/6 of the world's population right now, it lives in that one country. Wow. Yeah, when you think about the amount of real estate that there is in the world, yeah, by land mass, and how densely populated that place is, and there's only so many schools. Yeah, there's only so many jobs. There's only so many opportunities. And so people, in order to get ahead, have to sort of clamber. And what they do to clamber to get ahead is put their best foot forward. Yeah, now that's a really polite way of saying sometimes they have to fake it till they make it. That's still a polite way of saying sometimes they're a little bit dishonest. Yeah. And I grew up in a Western society where, it doesn't matter if you're going to be late. It doesn't matter if you made a mistake. It doesn't matter that, but just be transparent. Like in the Western culture, especially where I grew up in Adelaide in Australia, it was just be transparent. We really value integrity and hard work. And so there was a mismatch between who I was and how I was showing up in the world. And it dialed in from like the smallest things. Like my mates would call me up and it did like this. It sounds really insidious when I put it that way, but like my mates would call me up and they'd be like, "Are you coming to dinner?" And I'd be like, yeah. I'm 5 minutes away. I'm so sorry. I'm 5 minutes away. And I knew I was at least 30 minutes away, maybe 60, right? And I would and then they'd call me again 15 minutes later. "Hey, where are you?" So you said 5 minutes. And it's like, yeah, I'm on my way. And they would just be like, "Okay, cool. I'll see you soon." And then by the time I'd arrive 30, 60 minutes later to dinner, they just like everyone's food's cold and they're looking at me like, "What the actual, like, where were you?" And it's like, "Oh, sorry, I'm a little bit late," and just, trying to mull it over with my personality to try and like make it okay that I was late. And it never was, right? That's like a small thing. Now, fast forward, like having gone through the journey and having healed, and we can talk about the precipice of where I realized something was wrong. But now it's like if I'm running late and I know I'm going to be half an hour late, I tell people I'm going to be 45 minutes late, right? I set a very different expectation. It's like, "Hey, I'm running late. Might be 30. It's probably going to be 45. I'll see you soon. I'm really sorry that I'm running late. This is what happened." And I'm just completely transparent about it. And then when I rock up 35 minutes late, I'm not any stress. The person could do what they wanted with their time. Avoid trying to be late. Obviously, as a life coach, you're trying to set targets and hit them. So you try to not. You
nailed it today, buddy.
But that's the vibe. So those were the key values that were misaligned. And I didn't just have this like, "Oh yeah, now I've got plenty of languaging and I can explain that to you." But as a young adolescent male, I really couldn't explain that to you. Like I didn't have the words for that. My world really started to crumble all around me. So I'm going to university. I'm meant to be academically doing quite well because that was my pedigree, if you will, through school. I was always educationally quite active, you could probably say, academically quite switched on, touch wood, and that was the identity that I'd formed for myself. Everybody has their thing, right? And when I got into university, touch wood, it was an independent learning environment and there was no mentors, no guides. It was, I just started to crumble. And actually it didn't look like crumbling as well. That was one of the things that's probably worth mentioning. I had 3 jobs. I was, working multiple jobs. I was traveling around the world with the money that I would save from the jobs. As a young adolescent male, I was making, 3 times more money than everybody else around me. And I was going to university when I wasn't really attending it. And by everybody's means, it was like, this guy is doing really well. Like he's made it. And it wasn't until one day that the university turned around and said, "Dude, you haven't been coming. You don't get to keep just like, we can't just keep letting you enroll in subjects and you keep flaking on them," to the point where I realized, "Oh, no, like I'm meant to be here." And they're like, no, you've got to leave. And then the dishonesty, you can imagine the operating system that I had, like there was no way I could honestly tell that to my family, to my friends, to the people around me. It was such a ball of like toxicity. And I'd been living that incongruency. And, we talk about depression. And definitely there are people out there that have a chemical imbalance and they should definitely seek medical attention and advice. But for people like myself, the truth was depression is the opposite of expression, and I couldn't express my truth. Yeah, I couldn't express the true reality of how I was living. And so I was faking it till I was making it. There was a lack of integrity. There was a lack of honesty. And that was this real rub and grind. And at that point, like my whole world came crashing around. Like my partner wanted to leave me. My family was like, what? We've been, thinking you've been doing X, Y, and Z. My friends were like, I always knew you were full of shit. Like all my relationships, connection's my highest value now, but all my relationships deteriorated around me because of this one thing that I kept communicating to people was on point, but it wasn't. It really wasn't. And that basically, like, it took something that seismic for me to turn around and go, I'm losing all of my relationships. I'm feeling very alone. Something's definitely wrong. I don't think everybody lives life this way. I was faking it till I made it, and I definitely have not made it. I've just ended up with all this fake, and the pain was real. If I'm real, the only thing that was real was the pain, and I was literally sitting in my funk, and that ended up with me somehow, by some grace of God, sitting in front of a psychologist. I went to my GP. My GP in Australia was here like, okay, cool. You need to speak to let's put together a mental health plan and let's go see a psychologist. I'm sitting opposite the psychologist, and she's listened to my story much similar to how you guys have heard it here today, touch wood. And she was amazing. She was the first person that just went, oh, you're going to be fine. And when I first heard that, I was a bit pissed off, if I'm honest with you, Espen. I was just like, what?
You don't know what I've been through.
Yeah. The victim in me was like, my pain, it was so attached to it. And I know you help people break through that stuff. So, but I was so attached to my pain body, my identity with the pain body. I was just like, this is who I am. And you've just labeled it as depression. And when she gave me that label, she's like, you've been depressed, and you've been depressed for at least 6 years looking at your story. But you're going to be okay. Two things happened. First thing, the label of depression was actually really helpful for me. I know some people don't like labels because the energy sticks and it kind of gets stuck. But for me, being able to name it really helped me accept it, which then helped me like shift it. If I hadn't had that, I don't think I could have actually transcended it. But the key thing that happened in there is like, she goes, look, you're going to be fine. And I didn't realize this at the time, but she said two things, which now being a coach, having coached like 250 people one-on-one, like intimately, I realized how important this was. At the time, this sort of just swept past me. She said, look, first things first, you know that something's wrong. And second, you're here and you want it to change. And I was like, yeah, of course, I'm here. And I kept moving on, and she pulled on the thread that was, you just need to adopt honesty as a value. And I remember her saying that, and I was like, oh, what? She goes, if you could just be honest. And literally the floor fell out from underneath me. I was like, am I that bloody transparent? Like, I've always been walking around living life as a lie, faking it as I can make it. I thought everybody was doing that, by the way. I literally thought that was how everybody's operating system was wired. And this is the thing about depression. One of my favorite things, there's this metaphor, is like, person with good mental health is sitting on one end of a cliff, and then there's this massive valley. And then you look across the cliff, person with good mental health can just see across the cliff and just see the horizon. Yeah, it's super easy. But person that's in poor mental health is actually in the valley. They're in the ditch. And you ask them to, hey, just look up. There's a horizon. They can't see it. They're in the ditch. So when you make decisions, and this is where it gets really hard for people that are trying to support people with mental health, they don't look at life and reality the same way as you. Right. And having had that experience, it makes it easier now, touch wood, as a coach, for people that are struggling to be able to say, hey, actually therapy or counseling would be really useful for you. But yeah, she pulled the thread from the carpet, and she was just like, you need honesty, and install that as a value, and your whole life will change. And you're willing to change because you're here, and you know everything's wrong because your whole world has collapsed around you as a young adolescent male. You're meant to be indestructible, and you're here sitting opposite a psychologist. Something's up. So if you can adopt honesty, your whole life will change. And it did, even not because I adopted honesty in that moment. She gave me the tools to try and do that, and it took work to do on myself. But that was the first moment that I realized I could work on myself. I didn't realize I was a project as a human being that could actually be worked on. I didn't realize values were something I could install / sub out. And that's where honesty started to become a thing. And that's where, you know, the whole journey really sort of began as you asked the question.
This is solid. So one of the things that I think that we do by now is when we have guests on and they share their stories, I always invite our listeners and our viewers to go back to listen to what was said, to, in this case, particularly pause the recording and take notes. So when Amrit is talking about values, go ahead and take a note on your values when he's talking about living a life, particularly where, as you said, you were actually lying. And I actually teach this in my 3-day event when we get to the throat energy center, which is of course blocked by lies and set us free by truth. I say the same thing because I had the same pattern, buddy. You know, the conscious mind does something, but the unconscious mind is obviously the majority of how we experience life, emotions, everything. So I'd say something like what you said. It's a pattern, and I recognize myself, and I caught myself in the same pattern. You know, I'll be there in 15 minutes, or, you know, I'll see you at 10 o'clock. And then what I would do is exactly the same. I would arrive, but if I said, and here's the key for me, if I said that I'm going to arrive at 10 and I arrive at 10:10, what I've actually done in my mind, in my hypothesis, is that I have said one thing, but I've done the other thing. So now my unconscious mind is fully aware of the fact that I lied. Now the conscious mind might kind of brush it off, like you mentioned, with a bit of personality, bit of placator, bit of good stuff, right? That's all right. Sorry, boys. But why not just immediately decide on having a next level of authenticity, integrity, and honesty, and just give yourself that window? So now if I've got a meeting at 10 a.m. and you know, I may be running late, then I'm going to do just like you said. I love the example. I'll be there between 10 and 10:30. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Looking forward to seeing you then. And I might rock up at 10:05. And now I'm actually within that time frame. And obviously it's important to, you know, schedule time in between, you know, what we do and whatever else. But I love that because I felt just the same. And I, you know, I always say I draw the swords on myself. Where can I be more honest and integral and in more alignment? And I found just the same. And so I wonder, how do you feel? I mean, you're a spiritually awake person. I know the work you do, the people that you teach. I mean, it's just joy. You know, when you teach, it's joy and humility, which I love, you know, because we're the same. We're powerful beings, and we can maintain that level of I think humility is important, and that bit of grace. I just saw a complex where a young man grows up, Indian Eastern upbringing, cultural conditioning, in Australia, mismatch, gets slammed and put in his ass, 6 years of pain, recognizing. Can you just quickly talk to us about how that misalignment of values versus who you really are, because now we know who you are, and you get to live in alignment with that now. Can you tell us how that journey of getting energetically slapped around help give rise to your true values and how that's impacted your life? Because the void drives the value, right? And now you're on purpose. Would you have known that without the pain? Give us some context. So maybe those listening that are going through a tough mental state, emotional state, or even depression can see that, hang on, maybe this is part of my journey. I'm not going to stay here, but maybe it's teaching me something. What was in that for you?
Yeah, let's honor your question all the way through. Thank you so much for framing it that way. I had one of the most existential crises, and this is not in response to your question, but just to put everything into perspective for you guys. As a purpose coach, at some point along the journey, helping people on their purpose, and, you know, having coached, you know, this was like 2-3 years ago, I had this massive existential crisis where I was like, even when people are off purpose and feeling the pain of being unfulfilled, they are actually on purpose because life is recalibrating them back to purpose.
Truth bumps. That's what I wanted to ask, because I see that with people over and over again. Yeah, tell us about this.
And then I was sitting there and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm a purpose coach, but what are you really doing? Like, you know, like they're meant to be off purpose so they can get back to purpose. And then I had to like just eat, and like you said, another piece of humble pie and just say, hey, stop overthinking it, ego. you're just on people's journey, touch wood, and you're a brother walking. I call everybody brother. I call everybody sister. You're just a brother walking home by their side. If you're meant to be holding their hand through a particular point, or they're holding yours through a particular point, what a blessing that we have each other, right? So stop overstressing. Just purpose coaching is a label, and it gives you a container with which to hang out and spend time with people that, you know, it's positive for you and positive for them to spend time together. So the key thing, honoring your question going back, is like honesty and integrity was such a deep value piece. And I know, because you do so much work on energetics, Espen, that your audience gets this, right? Integrity was like a foundation piece, because once I became in alignment with integrity, right now, my highest value is not actually integrity. It's not actually honesty, right? Interestingly, it actually is my wife's highest value. We can potentially talk about that. But when I needed that as like the linchpin to start the transformation, because I needed to become into integrity with myself. Mm-hmm. And when I finally did, right, I could actually come home to my true, and the word true is very important, my true values. Now, I'm going to share with you what mine are. If you guys want to figure out what yours are, it's really easy. inspiredevolution.com/values, right? There's an exercise there. In 20 minutes, you will have the same level of clarity, touch wood, that I have on my top 3 values, which I'm about to share with you.
This is a critical exercise, by the way. If you guys have not done values, like clarity on your values before, go there, get it done. And I would highly recommend doing it every 3 months until you've got absolute clarity. And then once every 6 months after that for the rest of your life. And
certainty. It's so important, right? Because, you know, the way I describe this, and I do this in the training as well, it's like, and obviously I'm Indian, so everything sounds a little more spiritual, but like literally your values are the pillars of the temple that is you. Right? And the life energy and the life force flows through that temple. If you know what the energy of those pillars are, what you label the pillars that has erected your house, your being, your structure, your spirit into being, you can navigate life with so much more grace. But like with the cultural stuff that we were talking about, the mismatch and the soups and everything, I've installed other people's values. I'm trying to live into like this cultural value, this cultural norm, this Western pillar. And I'm trying to like build a house of cards, and it wasn't working, right? And then finally, when I came to integrity, and this is where meditation was so key to have that self-awareness, understanding my values. Now I can sit here and go, Amrit, connection is my highest value. Contribution is my second highest value. Celebration is my third highest value, right? Now, connection, contribution, celebration, I've danced the dance so deeply with these 3 things that celebration for everybody else like could mean like going out and hitting the piss and having a great time, champagne and caviar. Celebration to me means dancing, which actually means health. Right?
Can you do the sound?
That's celebration. Right? And for me, if I'm yowing and I'm able to dance and mobile, that means I'm healthy, right? So celebration to me actually means health, right? And this is something you'll do in the exercises. You define your values for what they mean for you. But connection, contribution, and celebration is who I am. Now I can stand there and go, that's really clear. Now that impacts everything, right? When Espen's like, hey, do you want to... like, would you like to be on the show? And it's like, do I get to connect with Espen? Yes. Do I get to contribute to potentially a bunch of people that are tuning into the episode? Absolutely. Do I get to celebrate life? Dude, I love hanging out with Espen, and other people may potentially leave this conversation a little bit more enriched. Hopefully they celebrate their life a little bit better. It's a full body yes. It's a full spirit, yes. It's a full mental, yes. It's an emotional, yes. Will you be a podcaster? Yes. Will you be a YouTuber? Yes. Would you be a coach? Absolutely. I get to connect. I get to contribute. I get to celebrate. Will you speak to audiences? Absolutely. I get to connect. I get to contribute. I get to celebrate. It makes the decision making and the alignment pieces so, so, so helpful. So absolutely. For coming home to that transformation and that particular point where it's like, actually, it's okay to break down to break through. Yeah. And one of the things I'll also add in there is I couldn't have done it without that therapist, the psychologist sitting there saying, hey, something's wrong. And also there were people and mentors in my life where I made it through that period. And which is, it's probably 90% of the reason why I coach. I'm being conservative. It probably is 100% of the reason why I coach. There were people there for me through that time where I was so broken. I would say broken is probably a loaded word. I would like to find a better word, but it's the word that fits right now. that I didn't even believe in myself. There was no self-belief. And I was completely apathetic to where my life went. And that's not, you tune into Amrit now, and it's not the vibe of Amrit, right? I was completely apathetic. As I was coming out of this depression phase, it like really had to like scrape the bottom of the barrel to like realize that I was depressed, realize there was a problem, address it, meet myself, face on, no longer buffering, not like avoiding with alcohol, avoiding with going out to meals, like literally just sitting there and going, shit, something is wrong. There were people that believed in me through that. And I would say it's a solid 6-month period that I went through a deep level of recovery, even though, the psychologist said it wouldn't take that long, and maybe relative to 6 years, 6 months isn't that long. But it felt like a long time. But people were there in my life that took the time to say, hey, I see the person in there. Don't stress about how you're feeling. You will get through this. And you're amazing. Keep going. You're amazing. Keep going. Touch wood. And just to think about those particular people and how much they helped me get through that period and the ripple effects that caused, right? Because that gave me so much, touch wood. And now having coached and spoken to people all over the world, and the podcast and everything that, is a lot of it, like I said, almost 100% of it stems from that. The support that people offered me, it was such a gift that I know it's almost like a moral obligation to just do this work forward, right? They paid it forward.
It doesn't take any effort, right?
Well, it's my values. It's connection, contribution, celebration. It's where I fall into flow. Like I would be doing this for free.
Exactly.
And because I'd be doing it for free, I show up 150%. People are like, why are you doing podcasts at 4 a.m. with people in the States? Why are you doing podcasts at 11 p.m. with people in Germany? And it's like, dude, it's fun. It's not work.
And that's the thing, right? I don't know if you guys caught this, but what Amrit was just saying here is that he has made decisions and regularly makes decisions in his life today, including, do I jump on the podcast with Espen or not, based on the alignment or lack thereof of his values. So 1, 2, 3, he's clear on his top 3 values. He assimilates that with making a decision today, tomorrow, the next day. Will that be a decision in alignment with my values? And again, we go back, we review our values, we become impeccably conscious and clear on our values. Then we can consciously audit our lives and see what is out of value alignment. Because then when Amrit, and I'm, paraphrasing here, when you were saying that you were living with lack of honesty, that was out of alignment with your values or the transition into your new values at the time. So then the way I teach this is that often depression is not a chemical imbalance because you're sick. But in this instance, rather, I would call it a sign from your soul to help you actually heal and purge those programs in the matrix to come back to your authenticity. And as we know, when we do what we love and love what we do, we can't help but being wildly successful because, well, as Amrit says, he absolutely loves it. So again, just really putting that in context for everyone watching and listening, because if you are feeling stuck, then the first place I would say to start is get clear on those values. You've got one on your website. I've got one on my website. Dr. John DeMartini's got one on his website. Tony Robbins talks about it all the time. There's a reason why we harp on about these values.
The basis. It's the basics. It's the fundamental building blocks. Yeah. I just wanted to pepper something in there, and I'm hoping not to ramble about it too much. One of the key things also with like because Espen's work, your work is so built on like solid human fundamental energetics, right? And when I even just interacting with my wife, like we have the example I love to share is, I'll keep it short, but we were checking out of a building. We had our tenancy had expired. We're moving out. This was like about a decade ago. We were opposite this guy. We had to book an elevator just to get out. It's one of the things you do. And the guy was super toxic. Like, I need a better way to describe it, but he was just super toxic. And I couldn't get out of the room fast enough. We got out of the room and, booked our elevator. All right. And my wife was like, back then she was my girlfriend. She was like, why didn't you say something to him? And I was like, what? Why didn't I say something to him? Right. And I was like, 25, 24 at the time. And I was like, why didn't I say something to him? And I was like feeling kind of emasculated, because when your woman says, hey, bro, why don't you step up? That's what the man brain does. It's like, oh shit, I might not be man enough, right? Why didn't I man up to the moment? And I totally could have gone into a complex right? And been like, oh, I'm not man enough. I need to work on my masculinity, etc., which a lot of people do, right? I see a lot of this online these days. The conversation around masculinity and femininity is pretty ripe these days, I would say. But touch wood, I had the grace that I was working on my values at the time. And as you get clear on yourself, you can get clear on others. Like I saw connection, contribution, celebration. And I just went, was I ever going to say anything to this person? Would it have fostered connection? No. Was there anything to contribute? No. Was I going to spend any time in celebration in this space? No. Holy shit, Amrit was never going to say anything. Amrit's not that guy. And I was just completely relieved. I was just like, oh, I'm just not that person. I was never going to say anything. I'm Mr. Connection, and this is not a connection I want to form, and I wanted to disconnect as fast as possible. I was just ready to leave. As soon as I walked in that door, I was already out of there. Yeah, I just needed to get my task done, and I was out. And then I cast a look without even her doing the exercise. I was like, oh, and my wife's highest value is integrity. And so obviously someone that's operating from integrity wants to say something and say, hey, that's not okay. Don't treat me that way. Someone that's operating from connection is like, I can't wait to get out of here.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden, when we look at the energetic integrity of me and like not having to like allow other stories to bring me down, I can also look at the energetic pillar that is my wife, look at the energetic pillar that is Espen and go, yeah, I actually know how to navigate the world. Espen would like Amrit, or my wife would like Amrit to be operating such a way, but Amrit's integrity is actually being Mr. Connection.
Through his values.
I'm honoring that. And so, yes, absolutely your life, but also your relationships. There's a whole reason why Espen and I are touting onto this as being the fundamental building blocks and the basis of where you really come into alignment with your purpose and the way you live your life, because it's in your relationships, it's in your decision making, it's in everything. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there.
Oh, dude, I think this is highly valuable. And I love how, again, it can be explained so simplistically because, again, that could have been a process for years. I should have stepped up, or I should have been a man, or now I don't have balls, and now my wife's going to leave me, and she doesn't love me, and I didn't protect her, and la, 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 la. And at the same time, you know what it takes to protect your woman should there be that line crossed. It's not that, you're not going to step in, when depending on how far it goes, you already got that covered. So I think it's really good. I mean, how amazing would it be if couples can actually speak through their values and be able to come together in these ways? I think this is really, really special. And again, just comes down to firstly becoming conscious of your values. And I do an exercise as well, and I do like a life coaching program, and we look at 2 weeks. And in each area of life, and the 2 weeks that we do on time, we actually analyze the 168 hours that we have in our lives. And I actually, in the spreadsheet that I do, big geeky like you sometimes, I guess, is I go through line for line, how many hours of the week am I actually living in alignment with my highest
this
values?
Thing that I love. Yes. Yeah. It's like a razor blade, and it cuts. But when you start auditing your life based on where your time is actually being spent, it's medicine. It can be bitter, but it's super potent. It's super potent because it's the one commodity you don't like. It's not renewable, right? For most of us, it's time. It's the one thing. And a lot of people think, oh, money is the most important thing. And it's like, people like Espen and myself, I'm comfortable to say, would argue it's time and energy, right? Like you definitely want time. And, some people say, oh, but time's the most important thing. It's like, you also want to be aware of the energy that you're carrying in the state for the time, right? Like you might have, 150 years to live, but what were the last 50 years like? Like energy is also incredibly important, right? Touch wood. You want to have the energy to honor and respect the time importantly as well. Yeah.
And if you really break it down, we talk about time, energy, and money. Both time and money is energy. So the ultimate asset of assets is always going to be energy.
Spoken truly like Dr. Espen. I do agree, but I've drunk the Kool-Aid.
Right, tell us. I've got one last. I'm going to ask you a question. After this one, I got a final question for you. I just want to check in. You've specialized now in purpose and leadership coaching.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the things that you found over working with, over 250 people now? What is that overall, if you were to say, those listening, those watching, resonating with the content, maybe if they actually want to master their values and living in alignment, they'll go back and start the recording, listen to it again. Please do share it with your friends and loved ones. If you know someone struggling, this is important. You know, we always share the love and accumulate good karma along the way. But what would you say are some of the common trends that you've seen with the people that you've worked with, from, you know, being depressed or stuck or just being okay? A lot of people listening, they're not depressed, but they're like, I know that there is more. How do they make that transition? What are some of the patterns that you see in terms of moving into leadership and also moving into purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And at the risk of sounding like a guru for a sec, I do think we're going through a collective awakening at the moment, is probably the heart of it. And to sort of put it in a quick sort of, to answer the question somewhat concisely, when you start looking at some of the teachers that are available in the world at the moment, especially coming from the West, they look at consciousness as having 4 sort of levels: level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 consciousness. Personally, I hate the word levels, right? Because it sounds hierarchical, and reality and being should not be hierarchical. It's not, right? It's a unified whole one existence. Like, if you had to rebrand spirituality, the word would just be unity and you'd be done. You'd be set.
Exactly.
Right? So hierarchy within unity is already like a corruption. But pardon me, language is very difficult to sort of come across in the spiritual space. But we have 4 levels of consciousness. So just, you know, call it a spectrum, whatever you want. Level 1 is pure victimhood. Yeah, it's life is happening to you. Yeah, life is happening to me, and I'm just a victim of everything that life is subjugating me to. Level 2 consciousness is life is happening by me. I call this bloke the achiever. Yeah, it's like you can achieve. You've cracked open from life is happening to me all the time to actually I'm empowered. I can set some goals and I can achieve some stuff, and I'm going to go and I'm going to achieve this and I'm going to achieve that, and you achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve. And you actually have a pretty remarkable life standing around you, right? And you're like, dude, I've got a pretty nice house. I've got a nice family, touch wood. I've got a nice car. Stuff's actually working out for me quite well. Why do I still feel like a deflated balloon? And this is what I think the collective is going through at the moment. Now, I'm not an expert. I'm just commenting to your question, which is what are the trends that you've seen collectively, having worked with so many people, that as quality of life has become affordable for more and more and more and more and more and more people, fulfillment hasn't kept up. And so it's like my quality of life, my materialistic world is really catching up. I've got all this amazing stuff. I should be feeling really good here. I've got everything that was marketed to me by the capitalistic model, the matrix, which you referred to before as being it. I've got it, but my being doesn't feel it, right? And this is where people start to go, I've been achieving and I can achieve more. And now I'm starting to realize that this, if I get X, I will be Y, might be broken as a model, right? If I get BMW, I will be successful. If I get family, I will be happy. If I get house, I will be secure. The equation that if get this, then feel that might be broken.
Oh, I love this.
Consistently what I'm finding amongst those people that I'm coaching, right? And that's why it's called purpose and leadership coaching, because people were previously breaking down and having this existential crisis. And then they would come to coaching, and I've continued to coach them 4 years later, and now they've become leaders in their space because they're aligned to their values, as Espen said, when you show up doing what you love. But we've continued to nurture those relationships, and I'm still their coach, right? Touch wood. They would rather do it with me by their side than not. And I'm just super grateful, touch wood, that exists, right? But so that's then turned into leadership coaching and keeping people aligned to their purpose. So the shift that's happening is from level 2 to level 3, which life at level 3 is happening for you. It's happening through you, right? Now that is quite a seismic difference. And that person, I like to call them the flower, or the person that's surrendered, the truster. You're in surrender, you're in trust, you're in flow. It's bigger picture thinking for sure, right? You're looking at the forest rather than the trees. The achiever's like, I'm going to get that tree. I'm going to get that tree. The person that's in level 3 consciousness is like, wow, how beautiful a forest. Why cut down a tree? just to take it home when I can come and revel in the forest and breathe good air all the time, right? And what that looks like is the conversation where some of this conversation started is like the existential angst that I had, which was, I'm a purpose coach. You're never off purpose. Even when you're feeling like you're off purpose, you're recalibrating back. That is level 3 talk, right? Touch wood. Not saying that, oh, I'm at a higher level. Again, I hate the word levels, right? Hate's a strong word, but I do.
I get it. I get it. You can see the matrix. Well, at least then you can see back as to how it actually is happening for you. At least you change the question, you change the perspective, right? And to honor the model, just so that people walk away with something from this, level 4 is where life is happening as you. Yeah, you are one, you are unity consciousness, and there are some spiritual enlightened masters on the planet now that potentially carry that awareness. And that is enlightenment, I imagine. But enlightenment also, I feel, happens in bits, and awareness cracks open. It's just lightening your load to a certain degree. But there are some enlightened masters. I absolutely believe that at level 4 consciousness. But at the moment, when you ask about leadership coaching, what is going on, I feel like more and more people are going, okay, I've achieved and I can meet increased quarterly profits again and again and again and again. And that is putting money in shareholders' pockets. But what is the real impact? And the conversation around impact and fulfillment is becoming more and more prevalent, and people are realizing even more than sustainable is like, what's regenerative, like what actually feeds this, that feeds that. And like the energetical awareness, I think, is coming more into people's minds. So I have this feeling that collectively, it's not just humanity, but potentially the planet. And I know how woo-woo I sound. I don't know how else to articulate this, but we are going through a collective shift where the world as a whole, whether you look at the earth as a being, or people as beings, as humanity as a being, space, I don't know enough about that. But I do know the experience that I've had with people, collectively, there is a shift where people are going through enough achieving. How do I go along with life and go with what it's trying to teach me and still achieve, but achieve life on life's terms, not my terms? And how do I get the grace to be able to do that? Holy cow. And then you start watching, and surfing is the best metaphor for level 3 consciousness, in my humble opinion, right? It's like everything you did at level 2 really helps, because it's like I learned how to jump up on the board while I was on the shore. I've learned how to bob at the back of the waves and pick a wave. But now I've got all that in my muscle memory, so that when I actually just jump on a board, I can actually flow. That level 2 achievement stuff helps, definitely. And not having level 1 victimhood, it's like, yep, I'm not going to be subjugated like as a victim to the wave. I get to pick my wave. And then now when you're on the wave, you actually, the muscle memory is like helping you stay connected, and you can ride the wave all the way back to the beach, right? It's a real blessed feeling. And you don't control the wave. You go with the wave.
Level 2 is all about control. Level 3 is all about embracing chaos. And in ancient Indian scriptures, you'll find that order is a masculine force and chaos is Kali, right? It's the feminine force. And so in there, we are going through, the patriarchy is dying, right? And the matriarchy is rising, and you can see it happening around us, right? So there is a collective shift, touch wood, that I, not the expert, may feel like is on the way, and we're currently going through that transition. And that's where I think leadership is also evolving. And that doesn't mean that there's no space for men as leaders. Absolutely, we have a responsibility as the pillars for the structure that is coming, and it's for women to really occupy that space in a really gracious way.
Yeah, and also perhaps the feminine in us, as you've just said, that flow aspect, that is not a control aspect. That is, and I think it's a good recipe for life in general, because you can't go out and, expect the traffic will be this way and life will be this way and things will happen this way. I mean, the more things we try to control, the more the universe is going to show us that we're out of control, the more we're going to suffer, until we realize that we are here to ride that wave, and we are that wave. I read a sentence the other day, which really rocked me, as absolutely loved it. And it said something like, when the devil tells you that you cannot withstand the storm, you smile and answer, but I am the storm. So it's like, what have you got on me now? I am energy. I am in flux. I am free to be me. And within my values, also experience flow. I sat back and I thought to myself, that gives me ultimate power, because there's nothing you can take away from me if I just allow myself to be like that. And I love this. And, we need more conversations like this. I'm grateful, bro, and it's good to see again. You know, this is I think the third time we're hanging out like this. Good to be able to share this, you know, with our audience as well. Now, okay, I got a last question for you. Do you mind if I just throw you like just left field coming in there? Ready?
The curveball with spin. Let's go.
All right, here we go. Imagine this: Amrit Sandhu is on this grand stage, this world stage.
Okay, keep me humble. Mm-hmm.
And people from all over the world are listening, watching, present, and tuning in. And you get this one opportunity to share your message to the world. Whenever you're ready, take a breath, take your time, and don't jump in. What's your message to the world right now, Amrit?
I know this. Your health is your purpose, and your purpose is your health. They are one and the same. Absolutely. Right. And it's what you've heard me share today. It's people see me as a purpose and a leadership coach. In the cell of my being, I'm a health coach. Right? Because you are the most vibrant, vitality brimming version of yourself when you are on purpose. And I used to think I was like somebody with a message, right? Touch wood. In the ancient science of Ayurveda, which is the science like, you know, yoga comes from, like, it's like, you know, you've got traditional Chinese herbalism. A lot of that is also built on ancient Indian herbalism, right? But you can call it a sister. Let's just not be egoic about it. Ayurveda, the whole science of health and well-being, ancient science, at its heart is designed to facilitate your dharma. And your dharma is the reason you're here. The reason you're here is today's day and age language as purpose. So your health is your purpose and your purpose is your health. If you're feeling stressed out, stress is a free life coach. In nature baked it in. You're doing the wrong thing. We don't listen. Down another coffee, push a little bit harder, another foot on the gas, keep going. And then eventually you get smacked. Poof, I'm burnt out. What? You didn't listen.
Been
Just
there.
Listen. Just listen. Yeah. And so it's baked into the fabric of it. If you're feeling not aligned to your health, take a moment, reevaluate your direction in life. Yeah. And what you're doing. And it's the collective awakening. It's part of it now, right? The boundaries of like, that's my work life and this is my home life. That's gone. You know, you are your work. You are your family. You are it. So you can't spend 8 hours a day doing something you absolutely despise and then come home and have a green smoothie, do the meditation, go to the gym, get a good amount of sleep and be like, I'm great. No, you're not. You hate what you do for like a third of the day. You spend the other third of the day sleeping. You got a third of the day to put the pieces together. No, sorry. And you guys know this. I'm not telling you something you don't. Yeah. But that's the message.
Lovely, man.
Your health is your purpose.
Beautiful.
Your purpose is your health.
Boom. Now tell our listeners, viewers, where do they go to get more Amrit Sandhu? Where do they go? Where do they absorb some of this joy?
Touch wood, guys. Okay, so first of all, I will just say this to you just because I know that even now, like only like 2 of the people that are listening to this, and I know thousands will listen to this, potentially only 2 of you will actually go find your values, and I still don't understand why. Like I just don't get why you won't do that. So inspiredevolution.com/values, or head on over to Espen's website and find a way to get your values. I care. Just get your values. It's so instrumental. If you haven't picked it up from this episode, I'm not sure what else you got out of it. I'm being audacious, pardon me. But if you want to tune more around the Inspired Evolution, youtube.com/inspired evolution, you'll find every week we're putting out, every day actually a video comes out basically. So there's a podcast that comes out every week. There's coaching videos, there's testimonials, all sorts of stuff that comes out in that space. So you can find out more, just subscribe on YouTube. It would mean a lot to me because I get to have guests like Espen on, and it's a real privilege to have a platform that continues to grow, because then that enables, it makes it easier to attract the Espens of the world onto our platform as well. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to check us out on YouTube and potentially subscribing if it resonates with you. If you want to have conversations and go deep on coaching, Amrit.coach, you can find me there. The website for the podcast is inspiredevolution.com. But fundamentally, either website, you'll find your way to coaching. But I recommend you check out the YouTube channel and at least start tuning into some of these conversations. I'm having them every week. But do get your values. It's just going to make your life so much better. Yeah, that's all I'll say. Thanks.
Absolutely. Love it. Thank you so much for taking the time. I greatly appreciate you. It is always a privilege and a pleasure. And again, thank you for doing the work that you're doing, my man.
Touch wood. Thank you so much for you, bro. It is always such a pleasure and an honor. And I had fun as I knew I would. Thank you so much, bro. Really appreciate the opportunity to connect, contribute, and celebrate.
Exactly right. Go check out Inspired Evolution, everybody. This has been Amrit Sandhu. Thank you so much for your time. And until next time, bro.
Big love, brother bear. See you soon.
Bye, guys.